in coaching, we always have to relate things to what matters to a person. So if you told me, yeah, listen, Luka, but I want to just make more money online, I'm going to relate how going into a live, training session or seminar is going to help you make more money online. Which it will. I do believe that, but I have to relate it to the thing that you want. If I'm going riffing off of what I think is important, but you're like, I don't give a shit. If somebody comes in and they're like, my back hurts. It's like, okay, we're going to deadlift. You're like, whoa. But if you go like, no, actually, look, we're going to do it this way and that way. We'll start with kettlebell, and it's going to help you strengthen your back and have better form and, get those tissues resilient, improve tolerance. And this is what's going to help you with your back. Different story, right? So you always have to relate things back to what people want. By the way, I don't get the guy that I'm training that will, probably sign like $18 million a year contract. It's the same thing, right? Hey, listen, man, we're doing these things because we don't want you to get injured again. We're going to make this knee resilient as can ever be, so you can keep playing and you can get 2 contracts, for 3 years at this rate, right? Oh, cool. Okay, cool. Sounds good, coach. Whereas to Susie, it might be like, hey, the jiggle under your tricep that you want to get rid of, that's going to help with that. Cool. I'm in, I wasn't in, but now I'm in. Yeah. And that, notice it comes back to, did we talk about sets and reps and, what the insertion point is? And, no, you got to know that. But what I'm knowing here is I'm understanding influence and persuasion. Because, Daniel Pink, to sell is to be human, right? People are like, well, I'm not in sales, Luka. Why should I study sales? I'm like, listen, you're selling all day. Your girl wants to get a burger, you want to get a pizza. Somebody's going to win to sell. You know what I mean? You're in the office shit, I don't have time to finish this project. Mary, could you help me out with this project? You're going to have to sell her, right? Because you know what? When you're struggling with that, I'm going to help you out. Don't worry about it. I got you, right? We're always selling. So you got to understand sales and influence and persuasion, because if you can't sell to that client to do the thing and to buy in, I don't care how much you know about, the Prolepin charts and everything else. It's just not going to work. And that, by the way, it took me a while to realize that. So it wasn't year one, I'm like, I got it. It was, I went through a lot of failure to realize that, holy shit, it's me that doesn't have the skill set. Because this is another one that you'll hear a lot, right? Well, look, I got uncommitted clients. I'm like, yeah, that's why the fuck they hired you. You're gonna get have you seen this online? It's I only take applications for people that are committed. Crickets, it's that's why we're there, to help keep them accountable, right? And so what you have to realize, and this was tough for me, is to go and say I don't have the skill sets to be able to help this person. It's not they're not the problem. I don't have those skills. I can help these people, but I'm not good enough yet at motivational interviewing. And, I don't know these things. So I had to go and learn them. And then, but that was the bigger realization, because there's so many coaches well, shit, people just don't, that's why you're there. And by the way, when you can help those people, that's why you make the big bucks. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of people can help the committed people. I mean, for me, when I was growing up, if you told me not make it to the NBA, blend this shoe in a blender and drink it, I'm drinking it. I'm the easiest guy, right? But it's most people are not like that. So you have to elevate your coaching skill sets to be able to help them. True. And it's hard to hear, but it's true. One of
the habits, I've got all your habits of elite coaches written down here on my slide. The one there was a couple that jumped out to me, but this one bleeds into that straight away, which is being a social chameleon. Which I really like, by the way, mainly because it's very common, I find, to get feedback from coaches being like, yeah, but this is who I am, or I don't want to be dishonest to people or be so can you because have you heard something to that effect before? Okay. So can you kind of go into that and say how well, really that's bullshit, because
absolutely,
you don't sit down with your friends and talk the same way you talk to your grandma.
Yeah.
Are you bullshitting her? Do you know what I mean? So
when you have a job interview.
Yeah, for
I'm
sure.
beating myself.
So how important is it for coaches to let go of that and be aware that if they want success, they need to be kind of variable or plastic in their behavior?
I mean, number one, I'd say let's zoom out and say what's your goal? The goal is to help that person, because helping that person is going to get you what you want, right? And the thing is, do you want to be right? Or do you want to get what you want, right? So it comes back down to it that, first of all, different people talk to you differently. This is human. This is normal. right? Do you go to a kid and go like, hey, what's up, Jack? We're gonna, you don't, you're like, hey, Jack, can we, you talk differently. Your tone is different. Same thing, you go to grandma. And by the way, how to be a social chameleon is one, how to talk to people differently. Where like the Susan, I might be like, how's that knitting class going? Oh, I'm glad you asked, Luka. It's excellent. Look, I made this sweater. Oh, it's awesome. It's beautiful, right? And then I'm going to go to the guy that's just like, dude, did you buy that new Porsche? You going racing again? Fuck yeah, right? Like different conversations, different tone of voice. In coaching, it's different. Like I got a group class. I got the older lady and I'm like, hey, I'm going to put my knee in front of your knee. Okay, it's going to make your hips go back. Great job, Susan. Awesome, right? And I'm like, Jay, put some fucking more weight on that. But like it's, and then they're like, yeah, because he's a former athlete and he likes that push and different communication. How am I moving around if I got 60 people in a small group? I got 6 athletes. I got XYZ. You have to become really good at that. And it comes back to the same thing. People will, it's so crazy. Like people will argue for their limitations. Like, well, I'm not going to change. Like they'll have to just accept me the way they are. Cool, you're gonna have 2 clients. You know what I mean? Like, but that's bullshit. That's a lie. Because again, how many settings, like throughout the day, that person has to change all the time. The way to speak to people, who am I speaking to? What's the scenario? Hey, somebody just lost their cat. Like how are you gonna be empathetic? Your voice is gonna be different, right? You're not gonna, well, I'm just being myself. No, like you're constantly changing and changing towards different people. And so I think that all of these things are a cover up for when we, remember, awareness precedes change. So step 1, awareness, right? Assessment precedes awareness. I'm going to go back to like, why do you do an assessment in lifting? Right now you can lift 85 pounds. That's the assessment. You're weak as shit. Okay, right? We're going to get stronger. Hey, let me video your form. That's an assessment. Rounded back, knees, right? That's an assessment. Now you have awareness. And now it's like, okay, now we can get it better. But it's the same thing with this. I would hope, going back to the apprenticeship thing, somebody you highly respect that goes, hey, do you mind if I give you some feedback? Which is, by the way, a very important thing. Like, ask for permission, right? Because then they're like, yeah, sure. See, now they gave you permission, right? So, hey, there's a couple of things I wanted to point out that you do, I think would be much more helpful for the client and for your career if you do it differently. And here's why, right? Because now it's like, okay, peer, I respect that person. I ask you for permission to give you feedback. Cool. Now I'm going to give it to you. So now you have the awareness of what you're doing. And, there was people, I got 1,000 scenarios where somebody I respected, like again, Martin was a person like, hey, you're on fire, but you curse too much when you speak. And guess what? I was like, yeah. It's like, dude, you're just filling words with fuck. It's like, and it's, guess what? Over the years, I pretty much almost eliminated it. I still say it here and there where I'm like just fired up about it. But, 2 years later, he's like, man, this is so much better. Here's the thing is like your message doesn't come across when you do that, because it can throw a lot of people off. And so from one of the best speakers in the industry that I respect, I'm going to listen to that. And I started cutting it down and cutting it down and cutting it down, right? So I think that's why it's so important to have, don't just like listen to feedback, like seek feedback.
Well, the inverse to the statement you made is interesting to me, right? Because that person that feels that way, like, fuck them, I'm just going to be who I am, expects the server at the restaurant to be able to treat them a certain way. Right. So they expect everybody else. You know what I'm saying?
True story.
So they're a fucking hypocrite.
Yep. Exactly.
But yeah, they'll bitch about other people that are hypocrites.
I come to this establishment and I want this type of service. And it's like.
So you want them to not be themselves.
Correct.
But yet you want to be yourself with the people that you serve.
But the thing is, I think all of those things are like, and I'm, if I get too off course, just let me know, man. But like, when I think this is an important part of the story. So I got married young. I got divorced. I did a lot of stupid shit, right? And that was like right around when I was 30. And I had to admit, like, dude, why do I do stupid things? Went into therapy, went into Wake Up Warrior, all that stuff. And I went through a bunch of books and that ended up going into the coaching. Debbie Ford has a couple of excellent books. Dark Side of Light Chasers, Why Good People Do Bad Things. Because I was trying to understand myself. Like, why am I just messing things up in my life, right? And that went down the rabbit hole. And part of, what Debbie Ford and Dark Side Light Chasers talks about is how we suppress different parts of ourselves, like emotions and stuff like that, right? Like when you're young and it's like, you're about to go to your aunt's and you're like, I don't want to go to my aunt's. And your mom's like, get a straight face. We're going. Don't look, And so you suppress that, right? Or, hey, don't be jealous. You suppress. So you keep suppressing. It's almost like rooms in a house, one room is one emotion. Look, we're going to lock that shit up. Right. And then you grow up and it's like, there's all these emotions that you're not, allowed to feel. So you suppress, which is never a good thing. That was a lot of what I was doing. I grew up in socialism and it's like, hey, you can't cry, you can't do this, you can't do that. So what ends up happening, and I'm going to get back to this as far as like what you said, you're expecting a certain type of behavior for a certain type of person. We have all of those things in ourselves, right? Everybody gets pissed off, jealous, mad, hurt. Like when you suppress those emotions, it's more likely that those things explode out at the time where you don't want it. And somebody's going to be like, well, what does that have to do with coaching? Because self-management allows you to manage others. You have to be a representation of, coaching and doing a good job, which to me, if you ask me, I'm still a big believer, like, taking care of yourself, being healthy, like being an example of what you do. But that also comes with like, how do you expect others to be respectful to you or talk to you in a certain way if you don't? And it goes back to, we all have those things inside of ourselves. Hey, I'm going to be nice and kind to a person when I need to be, but hey, is it sometimes valuable to not be nice and kind to people? You better believe it, right? If somebody is talking like crazy to my family, like it's going to be a problem. I'm going to get very, very unnice and unkind, right? And it's useful in a very specific matter. But if you suppress all these different things and you believe like, well, I'm this is just how I am. What? So you're just one way? That's unhuman. That's not human, right? Like you're all the different ways. And I think that when you suppress, and I know I'm getting like now, I'm like, this guy's fucking telling me to go to therapy, probably. but it was, that is when I realized. Let me kind of share the reason why I even brought that up. At that point in my career, which is 7 years in, right? What I realized is that like the people that I was like, oh, you're not committed to fitness. I was like, holy shit. They have an area of their life that they struggle a lot with. And I'm telling them that they're uncommitted. But in another area of my life, I'm messing up and I'm struggling and I'm having a tough time overcoming it. And it's not just like, hey, eat more protein and more veggies next week. Cool. All right. In my life, I went to therapy. I had to go join a program. And it like created so much awareness around my own life and what I was doing. Now, I'm not saying, become you're going to be a licensed psychiatrist to your clients. But I do believe that you have to understand these things, right? Because then you can be aware of them and you can guide people through certain things in a much better way. And one of them, again, being what we were just talking about is like being a social chameleon. We kind of looped it right back around, but it working on oneself will actually help you become more like that. It's not just like I read the book X and O, cool, do it, right? Yeah.
Well, you mentioned in one of your videos that you had done Thibodeau's neurotyping system. Yep. So he's been one of my mentors for a long time now, and I was lucky to kind of learn it directly from him. And for those that don't know, it's basically a system for assessing psychological profiles, isn't it? And I found, of all the things I've ever done, that for me was the game changer for coaching. If I had to pick one thing, training methodologies and all that stuff is cool, but it set me down the rabbit hole of psychology and the psychology of coaching. So I'm not saying people should do that system specifically, but for you, how big of a role does that skill set and knowledge play in being a good coach? Is it understanding people have different mannerisms, different habits, different styles of thinking and perceiving the world, and how you tailor maybe not just how you act, but even how you program and so on and so forth to that?
I mean, it's big. Here's why, right? Because if you're a person that studies training and you're so locked in on like what works, right? We have to have progressive overload. We have to do this. And it's like, hey, the program has to stay the same and consistent for at least 3 to 6 weeks. These are all the generalizations that, you kind of hear and whatnot, right? But then it's like, if you understand people and like novelty seekers, and then you start, and by the way, I learned this through learning it, but then applying it. So the person that like wants novelty, I call it the 60-40, 70-30. Can I make 60% of the program structured and progressive, but then the 40% is I'm still getting the result that they like, they want to work on arms and abs. Cool. We're switching it up every session. still working on arms and abs, still got some progressive overload. But they're like, cool, I can't wait for the next session where you do this new thing. But that's the thing that's going to make them keep coming back. Where if I don't, they might not even tell you, by the way. They're just going to be like, yeah, they'll tell you some other life thing. Like, oh, everything's become more expensive. I just got to put it on pause for a little bit. But all that happened was that they were just like, I want more novelty in my training, right? And like, you're not giving me the novelty that I want. So I'm going to go to this coach that has a different workout every time, right? And by the way, we can argue whether it's good or bad or it's going to get you there. But guess what? If they keep coming back to that workout, even though it's not smart, I'm juggling this. Like, who was the more successful coach? Because at the end of the year, they would have lost maybe 20 pounds, put on some muscle with that coach, right? And again, I think it's not either or. I think it's and, right? And same thing. Let's go back to the person that's, kind of seeking more safety, and you start putting more weight on the bar. And I've experienced this where you see them. It's almost like, I don't know, somebody just, robbed them at gunpoint. You put on more weight on the bar and they're like, right? Versus like, we're going to progress it by adding a 3-second eccentric and a pause at the bottom. Same weight, right? 6 weeks, 2 weeks this, 2 weeks this. And we intensified it in some way. And then when they own it, hey, do you mind if I put on how much? And not only like, do I put on XYZ weight? You go like, hey, do you want me to put on 10 pounds or 5 pounds? I gave them a choice, right? It's like it's autonomy, right? Like 5. Okay, cool. They do it. And then you're like excited, man, you crushed it, right? Because we are building that self-esteem. And guess what? Over time, maybe they're not that person anymore, right? Maybe they're not the whole safety person anymore. So because they can change over time. That's another thing too, right? And I think that's a huge aspect, because it goes back to, am I a master of my craft? How many different things influence people when we're lifting, right? And again, I learned some things the hard way, but a lot of it was like, who's the best person in the world doing this stuff? Cool, let me get around him. Let me read the book. Let me do the course. Let me do this like internship, whatever I need to do. And then I'm bringing it back and I'm doing reps. And then you learn. Because I mean, I don't, online you see this stuff all the time. Somebody writes a program. I look at the program. I'm like, you're not training. You're not training groups. You're not. Like, there's no way, right? Or you have this like best in the world scenario. But if I have a coach that has an 800 square foot gym, they can fit in 7-8 people. They only have one trap bar. How would you do it now? Right? There's context to everything. And so you gotta, it is art, man. Like it's a science and an art. And like, it's like Martin said, he's like, it's like jazz. You have the notes on the paper and they're just notes, right? But when the person starts playing jazz, man, it gives you a feeling. That's what great coaching is. It's like science and art come together in this music, right? And you want to just keep getting better at the thing. And if you become elite at that thing, man, you're gonna have a very, very fulfilling, meaningful career, and you're gonna make good chunks of money. I believe that.
Do you find that, if you talk about things like going down the psychology route, or even, we could even talk like, mobility and, movement quality and stuff like that. A lot of coaches kind of get a reverse to it, because they're like, well, how do I assess this stuff? How do I put in a framework to constantly assess these things? Whereas I think from what you're talking about and being a good coach, your answer, and I'm presuming here, would be like, really, if you listen properly and you're attentive, your clients are probably giving you all the data you already need to be the best coach for them. You just got to kind of listen.
Yes.
Right. So how much for you does it come down to being attentive and being present, and most of the time shutting up and letting them almost lead, if that makes sense? Whereas do you find that it's common for coaches want to impose themselves too much?
Yeah. And it comes back to, I definitely did this the first years of my career, because you're learning so much, but you're insecure. So that combination makes you want to share everything that you know. So it's a lot of yapping, right? Like, somebody's squatting and you're like, all right, soft knees. You're giving 7 coaching cues and the person's brain is going to explode, right? But you're trying to share what you know. Whereas, once you get the experience and awareness of it, you realize less talking, saying the right thing at the right time. And and again, I think with every client, but especially Gen Pop, where it's like, where did you feel that? How did that feel? Right? Do you want to, because the thing is, if you guys have heard of self-determination theory, so it's basically what internally motivates human beings, right? There's 3 things: competence, autonomy, and relatedness, which is community, right? So competence is skill set. If you are getting better at the thing, it's motivating you. I don't have to give you a carrot. I don't have to go like, hey, listen, do the squat better. I'm going to give you $100. Like if you get better at it, like it's internally motivating you, right? Which is why it's so important to show clients that they're getting better during a session. And it can be like one more rep, a little bit more weight, but it can also be like, this is why I do bring in things like the phone, where it's like video the drill, coach them up, video the drill when they do it a lot better, and then show it to them. Because it's like, look how much better you're doing this.